The sound of laughter bounced off the walls. But I felt like I wasn't even in the room. Dad's voice, sharp and dismissive, cut through the noise like a knife. "You are a nobody. Don't pretend you matter," he said, not even glancing in my direction. My brother, ever eager to twist the knife a little deeper, chuckled and added, "Honestly, we forget you exist half the time." My hand tightened around my fork, the polished silver biting into my fingers. I looked around the table, faces I knew better than anyone, yet faces that had never truly seen me. I knew this moment would come someday. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the sting behind my eyes that always came right before the tears. But this time, I wasn't going to let them see it. This time, I wasn't the girl who needed their approval. I slowly lifted my fork and clinked it gently against my glass. The clear sound sliced through the air, drawing every eye in the room toward me. I stood up, heart pounding so hard it almost drowned out the murmurs of confusion. "This won't take long," I said, my voice steady, stronger than I thought possible. "Just 3 sentences." I paused, letting the silence stretch out, watching the smirks fade and confusion settle on their faces. I wasn't the weak girl they remembered. I wasn't the desperate-for-love daughter or sister anymore. I had spent too many years swallowing my pride, second-guessing my worth, begging for scraps of affection they had no intention of giving. As I stood there, memories flashed through my mind like cruel little movies. Every birthday they forgot. Every celebration where my name wasn't mentioned. Every achievement I made that was met with indifference or thinly veiled jealousy. I remembered being 10 years old, standing by the window with a handmade card in my hand, waiting for a father who promised he'd come. He never did. I remembered every tiny moment that built up the wall between us, one brick at a time, until now, when I finally stood on the other side, no longer needing them to climb over. I could feel their eyes on me now, waiting, puzzled, maybe a little annoyed. Good. Let them wonder. Let them sit in that discomfort for once. I had carried the weight of their rejection for so long that it had molded me, shaped me into someone far stronger than they could ever comprehend. Tonight wasn't about revenge, not the loud, screaming kind they would expect. It was about truth, about quietly reclaiming the pieces of myself they tried so hard to convince me didn't matter. The fork still trembled slightly between my fingers, but my voice didn't. 3 sentences. That's all I needed. I drew a slow breath, feeling years of hurt and hope swirl together inside me. This wasn't anger speaking. It was survival. It was freedom. It was finally stepping out of their shadows into my own light. I glanced around the room once more, taking in the shocked expressions, the sudden silence, the way my mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Part of me wished I could capture this moment forever, the first time they truly realized I wasn't the same invisible ghost they'd grown comfortable ignoring. My first sentence was simple, but it carried the weight of years. "I have loved this family with every part of me that you decided wasn't good enough." The words fell heavy into the room, and for a moment no one moved. I watched as my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes narrowing like he was trying to find a joke in it somewhere. There was none. Not tonight. Tonight, I wasn't the punchline. I let the silence settle again before speaking the second sentence, the one that cut sharper than anything else I could have said. "And after tonight, you will never have to pretend to remember I exist again." My mother's face went pale instantly, the color draining so fast it almost startled me. My brother's mouth opened, then closed again, as if he wanted to say something sarcastic but couldn't find words. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in their eyes that I had never seen before: fear. Not because I had threatened them, not because I raised my voice or caused a scene, but because they realized they had lost something they never even bothered to value. I felt the strangest peace wash over me. No rage, no sorrow, just a quiet kind of acceptance that felt like stepping into fresh air after years locked in a suffocating room. I could have said more. God knows I had enough bottled-up speeches to last a lifetime. But I didn't owe them my pain, not anymore. I owed it to myself to move forward without dragging the weight of them behind me. Slowly, deliberately, I placed the fork down beside my plate and gave a small, almost polite smile. Not fake, not forced, just free. Without waiting for anyone to speak, I turned and walked away from the table. I didn't look back. Not when my mother called my name softly, almost pleadingly. Not when my father slammed his hand against the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. Not when my brother muttered something under his breath, too low for me to hear. I kept walking, each step feeling lighter than the last. And as I reached the door, I paused for just a second, long enough to say the third and final sentence, the one that sealed everything with a bow of quiet, irrevocable closure. Take care of yourselves, because you will never get another chance to take care of me. The door clicked shut behind me, and I knew without a single doubt that for the first time in my life I had truly chosen myself. The night air hit my face like a blessing. Crisp, cool, alive. I stood for a moment on the porch, letting the distant noise from inside fade into nothing. Funny how a house could be so full of noise and yet feel so completely empty at the same time. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have some grand strategy mapped out. All I knew was that I couldn't keep playing a role in their broken little play anymore. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their invisible daughter. I was something more. Something they didn't deserve to know anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know it was them. Probably my mom, trying to smooth things over with hollow apologies that only served to make her feel better, not me. Or maybe my brother, ready with one of his half-hearted jokes, pretending it had all been a misunderstanding. I didn't even pull it out. I just slipped it into airplane mode and tucked it deeper into my jacket pocket. Silence. It felt like power now, not loneliness. I walked slowly down the steps, my shoes crunching lightly against the gravel driveway. I remembered being a kid, running down the same driveway with skinned knees and untied shoes, eager to catch up with my brother, eager to be part of whatever he was doing. Even if it meant being teased or ignored. Just being included used to feel like a win. What a small life I had lived for so long without even realizing it. I reached my car, unlocked it, but didn't get in immediately. I stood there with the door open, just breathing, in and out, letting the cool night fill my lungs, letting the weight of 1,000 invisible expectations lift off my shoulders piece by piece. I thought about the time I graduated college and no one from my family came. The lame excuse about being too busy. I thought about the birthday parties they forgot, the milestones they downplayed, the way every family photo somehow managed to crop me halfway out of the frame. I thought about how many times I had convinced myself it didn't matter, that their love wasn't something I needed to measure my worth. And tonight, finally, I had stopped asking for crumbs at a table that was never set for me in the first place. A small, honest laugh escaped my lips. Not bitter. Not angry, just relieved. I got into the car, started the engine, and watched the house shrink smaller and smaller in my rearview mirror. No tears blurred my vision. No regrets clawed at my chest. Only a wide, open road ahead, and a heart that finally beat for itself. Tonight wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. And somewhere deep inside, I knew they would remember this night for the rest of their lives. The night they realized the one person they thought would always come crawling back didn't. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into a strange, aching sort of quiet. At first, I thought maybe I'd feel the urge to reach out. Maybe some hollow sense of obligation would drag me back into their orbit. But nothing came. No phone calls. No half-hearted texts. Only silence. The kind of silence that spoke louder than any argument could. At first, it stung. Sitting alone in my small apartment on Sunday afternoons, when family dinners used to be mandatory, I would feel the ache, not for them, but for the idea of them. The idea that somewhere out there, a version of my family existed where I was loved, seen, celebrated. That version had never been real, but grieving it still hurt. I filled my days with work, with small joys, with rebuilding the pieces of myself I hadn't even realized were missing. Little by little, I started noticing how much lighter I felt without their constant judgment pressing on my chest. How much more room there was to breathe without constantly trying to shrink myself into the version of me they might have approved of. Sometimes late at night, I'd scroll through old family photos. Birthdays, holidays, random Sunday afternoons. In nearly every picture, I could see it now, how I was always slightly apart. Always looking in, never quite fitting. Always the extra, never the star. How had I convinced myself for so long that it was normal? One night, after a long day at work, I sat by my window with a cup of tea staring out into the city lights, and finally allowed myself to remember it all. Not with anger, but with clarity. The birthday party where my brother got a brand new car and I got a card. The Christmas when my gifts were an afterthought and my mom joked that I was hard to shop for because you're so distant. The college graduation where I searched the crowd for their faces and found only empty seats. Piece by piece, the memories rearranged themselves, no longer distorted by my desperate need to believe I had been loved equally. I hadn't been, and it wasn't my fault. I wasn't broken. I wasn't unlovable. I just loved people who couldn't love me back the way I deserved. The freedom that came with that realization was so sharp it almost hurt. It was like stepping out of a dense fog and seeing the sun for the first time. One evening, as I was organizing old files on my laptop, I stumbled across a document I had forgotten about, a letter I had written to my family a year ago, but never sent. It was raw and angry, filled with accusations and heartbreak. I read it now with a strange, detached curiosity. The person who had written that letter was still inside me, but she wasn't running the show anymore. I didn't need them to hear my side. I didn't need them to apologize or to understand or to change. Their silence was answer enough. Still, a part of me wanted closure. A final act. Not for them, but for myself. A way to mark the end of this chapter properly, quietly, dignified. I thought back to that dinner, the one where my father had sneered at me, where my brother's laughter had stung sharper than any slap. I remembered how they had stared, confused and amused, when I tapped my fork against a glass and asked for a moment of attention. I had said I needed just 3 sentences. They had only heard 2. It was time for the third. The next morning, I woke up to a sky heavy with gray clouds, the kind that felt like they pressed down on you, making you move slower, think deeper. I didn't rush. I made my coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city breathe. Life went on outside, uncaring, untouchable. And for once, I felt the same way. It wasn't revenge I wanted. Not the kind where you scream and slam doors and demand apologies. It was something quieter. A line drawn in the sand, permanent and undeniable. A way to say, without shouting, you lost me. I opened my phone and scrolled to our old family group chat. It had been silent for months, apart from the occasional meme my brother sent that no one responded to. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but no words came. They didn't deserve words. Instead, I clicked the small Leave Group button. It asked if I was sure. I was. The second it was done, a strange calm settled over me. There was no grand fanfare, no moment of cinematic closure. Just peace. A tiny, quiet liberation. But I wasn't finished yet. I found an old photo of me, one that had been taken years ago at a family barbecue. In it, I was sitting on the edge of the patio, half in shadow, half in sunlight. Forgotten, barely in the frame. I had saved it, not because it was a good memory, but because it reminded me of the truth. I uploaded it to my social media with a short caption. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop sitting where you were never invited to be seen. No tagging, no names, just truth floating in the open, quiet but unmissable. Minutes after posting, my phone started buzzing. Messages from extended relatives, aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. Some asking if I was okay. Others just sending hearts or short, knowing responses like, proud of you, or took me years to learn that too. Not a single message from my parents. Not one from my brother. And somehow, that made it even more perfect. The silence from them was more honest than any apology could have been. I spent the rest of the day doing things for myself. I took myself out to lunch, something I used to be too self-conscious to do alone. I bought a new book. I walked aimlessly through the city, letting the rhythm of my footsteps drown out the last, lingering ghosts of their voices in my head. At one point, as the sun started to set, I found myself standing on a bridge overlooking the river. The water moved slowly, endlessly, never looking back. Neither would I. It's strange how grief and freedom can coexist in the same breath. How you can mourn what you never had while celebrating the fact that you finally stopped chasing it. I leaned on the railing and let the wind whip through my hair, feeling lighter than I had in years. In that moment, I promised myself something. I would not let the people who had made me feel small dictate the size of my dreams anymore. I would not waste my life trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. And most of all, I would never again apologize for existing. The third sentence I had promised at that dinner wasn't for them to hear. It was for me to live. It had taken me years to realize that some families aren't built on love, but on expectation and obligation. And it had taken me even longer to understand that walking away wasn't giving up. It was choosing myself. Finally, days turned into weeks, and life moved on, beautifully indifferent to the weight I had shed. I found myself laughing more easily, sleeping more deeply. The heavy ache that had lived just beneath my ribs for years had loosened its grip, and in its place there was room to breathe, to dream, to exist without apology. I started taking small steps toward the life I had once thought was beyond me. I enrolled in classes I had long put off, ones that made my heart race with excitement. I decorated my tiny apartment with things that felt like me: warm lights, messy art, books stacked in uneven towers. My world wasn't perfect, but it was mine finally and entirely. And yet, there were moments when the past tugged at me. Like a stubborn ghost, it whispered in my quieter hours. It reminded me of the girl I used to be, the one who sat quietly at family gatherings, shrinking into the corners, hoping someone would notice, would see. Sometimes I still wondered if they thought of me, if they regretted it. That answer came sooner than I expected. One rainy afternoon, as the city blurred behind streaks of water on my window, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but something inside me knew. I stared at it for a long moment before answering, my voice steady. It was my mother. Her voice, once sharp and dismissive, now trembled at the edges. She danced around the reason she called, making awkward small talk, like a stranger trying to find her footing in a foreign land. I listened quietly, not giving her anything to latch onto. Finally, after minutes that felt like years, she sighed. "Your father's birthday is coming up," she said. He mentioned you. "We're having a little dinner. You should come." It would have been easy to think this was an olive branch, a small peace offering after years of hurt. But I wasn't naive anymore. I could hear the hollowness beneath her words, the way she phrased it like an obligation rather than a heartfelt wish. They didn't miss me. They missed the role I used to play. The quiet scapegoat, the emotional dumping ground, the invisible extra at their grand performance. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the final pieces of clarity settle into place. "I won't be able to make it," I said softly. A beat of silence. "Oh," she replied, the disappointment naked in her tone. "Maybe next time." "There won't be a next time," I said, still calm, still kind, but with a firmness that even she couldn't miss. I ended the call before she could respond. I sat there for a long while afterward, feeling the final thread snap free. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. Later that night, as the rain finally stopped and the city lit up in reflections on the wet streets, I thought about the version of me who had once begged for their love, who had twisted herself into shapes too small to be seen, too quiet to be heard. She was gone now. In her place stood someone who didn't need their validation, their approval, or their company to feel whole. I had given them everything once, my loyalty, my love, my forgiveness, and they had tossed it aside like it was nothing. Now I gave them nothing. Not anger, not hatred, just absence. And somehow that absence echoed louder than any words I could have ever spoken. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on so completely that their world keeps spinning, but without you in it. Weeks turned into months, and my absence from their lives became a presence of its own. The seat I used to occupy at family dinners stayed empty, year after year. My name became something they couldn't mention without a lingering pause, a flicker of discomfort in the room. I didn't have to witness it to know. It was the kind of truth that lived in the spaces people tried to fill with small talk and forced laughter. I built my own life, brick by steady brick, not out of spite, but out of love for myself. I poured energy into friendships that were real, where love was not a currency to be earned, but a language spoken freely. I found mentors who believed in me without condition, people who said, "You belong here," without a second thought. Career-wise, things blossomed in ways I had never dared to dream before. Every little victory, every promotion, every compliment, every late-night project that ended in success was a stone laid firmly in the road that led me away from them. And still the echoes came. One evening, just as I was closing my laptop after a long day, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another instinct inside me that already knew. This time it was my brother. There was no pretense in his voice. No small talk. No false warmth. He sounded tired. Not physically, but in that heavy, soul-deep way that only comes when the lies people tell themselves finally run out of air. "We were talking about you," he said, voice brittle. "It's weird not having you around. Mom, she cries sometimes." I let his words hang in the air between us. Let him sit in the discomfort he had helped build. I could hear him fidgeting with something, probably the hem of his sleeve like he used to when he was nervous as a kid. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't realize how much we were hurting you. I thought you were just dramatic." There it was, that word, the one they had weaponized against me my whole life to dismiss my feelings. Dramatic. I almost laughed, but instead I just breathed in deeply and let it go. "I'm glad you're realizing it now," I said, my voice even. "But I'm not coming back." He was silent for a long time. "Even just to visit?" he finally asked, like a child hoping for a miracle. "No," I said. "I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not that girl anymore either." Another silence. And then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from him, "We miss you." I didn't say it, but the truth wrapped itself around my heart like a gentle, final goodbye. You miss the idea of me. You miss the convenience of me. Not the real me. I ended the call with a polite goodbye and sat there, staring out my window as the city lights blinked against the dark. There was no triumph in it. No gloating. Just peace. I thought about the last time I had sat at their table, surrounded by laughter that had never truly included me. I thought about my father's cruel words, my brother's dismissive tone, my mother's averted eyes. I thought about the girl who clinked her fork against her glass and spoke 3 sentences that changed everything. And I smiled, not because they finally saw the empty space I left behind, but because, for the first time in my life, I no longer felt empty. I didn't need to punish them. Life had already done that. Because when you teach someone that your presence is disposable, you shouldn't be surprised when they learn to walk away and never look back. And I had learned, finally and beautifully, how to walk away without leaving a trail of anger behind me. Only silence, the loudest sound they would ever hear. Months later, on a chilly evening, I found myself sitting alone at a quiet cafe. A small place tucked away from the noisy streets, the kind of place where nobody knew my name, and that felt like a blessing. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the steam rise and fade into the air, thinking about how far I had come from the person who once begged to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. The past no longer felt like chains pulling me under. It felt distant now, like an old story someone else had lived. It wasn't anger that filled my chest, it was gratitude. Gratitude that I had been forced to save myself. Gratitude that the people who broke me also set me free. I had no desire to reach back out. No curiosity about their holidays, their dinners, their milestones. I wished them well from a distance, so far that their hurtful words could never reach me again. One evening, I received a letter. It was from my mother. The handwriting was shaky, almost hesitant. She wrote about missing me, about regretting how they had treated me, about how time had taught her the value of things she once took for granted. She said she wished she could turn back the clock. She said she wished she had been braver, kinder, stronger. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply let it be what it was. A late apology written in a language that would never undo what had been done. Sometimes people are sorry only when they lose the version of you they took for granted. Sometimes their guilt is about their loss, not your pain. I didn't write back. Not out of spite. Not out of pride, but because I no longer needed to explain myself to people who had once told me I was invisible. I didn't need to prove anything. I had already proven it to the only person who ever mattered, myself. As I left the cafe that night, the cold air kissed my skin, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. Every step I took felt lighter. Every breath felt deeper. There was no grand speech. No big confrontation. No dramatic ending. Just a quiet, powerful truth. Sometimes the most beautiful revenge is living well, loving yourself fiercely, and letting silence tell the story you no longer need to. And I finally was at peace.